It's media day here at Mississippi State. Coach Joe Moorhead, the assistants, coordinators, and many players came to talk to us, Steve. And I have to say, media days are generally an upbeat operation. Everybody tries to put a best face forward. That wasn't a lot of effort today. It just seems to come natural to them. They feel really good about where they are a week into camp and the prospects for this 2018 season.
A lot of confidence, David, and talking to defensive players to a man, they have almost bought into this. We can have a big year. We can win the West. We can get to Atlanta. We can be a special team. And it's not just one guy saying that. It's a collective belief among the team. And it's really one of those deals where the fans are hoping for a big year. It seems like the players are planning for a big year.
You know, I was talking to Malik Deer and I asked him specifically about the ranking. Ranked in one poll, I think the AP comes out in another week or so, top 20. And we know the history of Mississippi State with rankings, things like that. And fortunately, the players say, they don't notice. Probably lying a little bit. They hear about it, but they don't seem to take much attention to it. But they also, at the same time, know how good they are, as you say.
Well, true, David. And one thing I'd like to point out, too, is that all those teams in years past that were ranked in the preseason that didn't finish well have no bearing on this team whatsoever. And there's no such thing as jinxes or hoaxes or any of that hokum. None of that has any bearing on this season. And I think people need to abandon that. But you're right, David. Nick Fitzgerald even said they have kind of adopted a mantra, is that what other people outside of this building think of them is not their business. They're not even concerned about that. And I agree. I think the ranking is nice, but I don't think they're overly concerned about it.
Well, the other thing, too, the Mississippi State is ranked because a very good team is coming back. They finished strong last year, and almost all the key players are returning from the past season, and some key players who did not play last year back from injury, with some additions on the defensive line, the wide receiver positions as well. So Joe Moorhead has walked into a loaded situation. We've said that all year. He seems to not only have accepted it and welcomed it, but now he's taking advantage of these guys, but keeping the edge out in competition. He made a great statement today that they're keeping it competitive in practice, almost to the point some dust-up, some scuffles, but he wants them to play with emotion, but not emotionally, if that makes any sense.
It's sure, David. And I thought Coach did a great job today just kind of detailing out the mindset of the team. And there is a lot of competition going on. But also, too, there's some established players returning that have put Joe Moorhead and his staff in a very enviable position. Probably the best position of any first-year coach in the SEC, if not the country, because you've inherited a very talented and experienced team that accomplished some big things. And then Joe's in a situation now with a couple of tweaks here and there can take this team from possibly an 8-9 win team to possibly a 10-11 win team.
We're not going to go through every position, obviously, but we're going to hit some highlights that Coach Moorhead and the assistants we spoke with were on. Let's start with the one that everybody asks about every time we talk, wide receiver. You can see there's a little bit of edge in the coaches in that they're tired of hearing about it. Joe Moorhead said the same thing as far back as April. He said, I'm sick of hearing this subject, and now they are too. But instead of taking offense at it now, they're saying that, yes, we've got the guys developing, not just to the slot and tight end. We know those are good, but now some of the wideouts really stepping up. Hit some of those names, Steve, and I think all the fans out there know the three that we're going to mention first.
Well, Stephen Guidry was the guy that was signed to be an immediate impact guy, and he was limited in the spring. He's had a good fall, even though he's had a couple of days where he's been on the sidelines kind of watching, getting mental reps, but he is a special player. And our sources down at Hines Community College have told us he wasn't always the best practice player, but he was always a great game day player. So we're expecting big things from him. Coach Getz, he said he put on 20 pounds. He's been in the Mississippi Strength and Conditioning Program. Devontae Jason, one of the best practice players on the team. But I thought Getz made an interesting comment about the newcomers and really about the wide receiver group as a whole. When asked, do they feel the pressure to kind of understand that this team will go as far as them, he just kind of point blank said, no, they don't feel that. But he also understands really everything flows through the wide receiver position in this offense, and they're ready for the challenge. And I think it's a new broom always sweeps clean, David, and I think maybe Getsy was the right guy to come in and give some of these guys a fresh start, but really kind of give them a new lease on their college football life.
You mentioned bulking up the receivers, but one guy wanted to get some bulk off, and that was Kylan Hill, and it seems to be paying off. Yes, Harris Williams is still the A-dog in that backfield, but right now, I'm not going to say 1A, 1B because that has bad connotations with a few State fans recent years, but if there's a number one out there, it's a very narrow margin between those two.
And they're great complements for each other. Harris Williams is kind of a one-cut runner that kind of does his work between the tackles. Colin Hill is a guy that's, if he gets the corner, it's trouble for a secondary because when he gets a full head of steam at 211 pounds, he's going to be very difficult to bring down. He's also a guy, even back to his high school days at Columbus, he runs angry. And Harris Williams is a guy that over a period of time, he takes 2- and 3-yard bursts. The next thing you know, in the fourth quarter, they're 8- and 9-yard gains. Colin Hill's a guy that can gash you, and Harris Williams is a guy that'll beat you up. So it's a great compliment, but I think it's a great situation for State fans because I think the guy that's going to benefit the most from this group is Nick Fitzgerald.
Absolutely. Looking on the defensive side, let's quickly cover the cornerback position. I talked off record a bit with Coach Terrell Buckley, and he mentioned that, yes, they're making the transition from a lot of bump and run and press man to adding zone. Not full-time zone by any imagination. They're going to play everything. But talking to the coaches, they think the zone will give a chance for more turnovers because the cornerbacks will keep an eye on the quarterback a little bit longer.
And Coach Shoup said that. You played a lot of bump and run, which led to a lot of incompletion, but not a lot of turnovers. And so playing zone, you got more eyes on the ball because your eyes are in the backfield and eyes are on the quarterback rather than on your man. And so that makes sense. We're still going to run some bump and run. We're still going to do a little bit of what we did last year, but we're going to add some elements in the coverage this year. It's going to make things a little more opportunistic, shall we say, from a turnover standpoint. And you've got guys back there like Cam Dantzler and certainly Mark McLaurin that once they get their hands on the football, they're pretty dynamic.
In linebacker position, everybody knows how good State is, certainly the first three, between Errol Thompson, Leo Lewis, and Willie Gay. The concern there, obviously, is depth. And Coach Shoup came out and admitted it, and Coach Lukabu has said the same thing. They've got to have some depth, but they think some of these new kids and a transfer, Kirby Lane, could really make a difference at that position.
Yeah, Shamar Kilby-Lane's a guy that's been injured most of his career. You know, he had a true freshman year that he was good enough to play at Florida State as a true freshman, and he was a U.S. Army All-American, so he's not a guy that comes in kind of unproven. But then he gets banged up, and he gets banged up at Colin last year. And Coach Glenn Davis told me that there wasn't a lot of great film on him because of the fact that he was hurt. But he says when he was healthy, he was a special player. State needs him to be a special player this year, not just from a special team standpoint, but with three solid returning guys, you need somebody to be that next guy on the two deep. Tim Washington's a guy that's playing some at Mike. He's a guy that's been a career special teams guy. It's time for him to take the next step. So some of these guys are going to be forced into action pretty early, but Kilby Lane's one of those guys we're keeping an eye on to possibly be the next guy on that two deep chart.
Quickly looking at special teams for Mississippi State now. We had some talk today at Media Days about that. Coach Moorhead and Coach Joey Jones addressed it. And interesting, they started off with the coverage because they've made clear that coverage is, where it starts in today's game. But they want this special teams this year to be a factor, as Coach Moorhead has said, to win 3 games and lose no games. What have you seen so far and heard about State? Let's start with the kickers, especially between the punting battle between Tucker Day and Cody Schexnayder.
Yeah, it's been pretty much neck and neck between Schexnayder and Tucker Day. And Joey Jones said today that Tucker Day has been a little more consistent as of late. And that's good news for State because there were times that he would hit a 65-yarder and then follow it up with a 27-yarder. And so consistency is the key with him. It's not a question of ability with him. He has a NFL caliber leg. It's just a matter of harnessing that and making sure you're getting the consistent production. It's like you got out of Logan Cook. But that won't be a battle that I don't think will be determined for a while. And Joey Jones said as much today. We feel very comfortable with Jace Crispin as the kicker. Had a big year last year. Spoke with him at length today for a feature later next week. I think people are going to be pleased with what he's had to say. And Scott Goodman's a walk-on kicker from Brandon, Mississippi, big Mississippi State town there in Brandon, Mississippi. So I know you Bulldog fans down there are happy. But Joey Jones came out and said today that Scott Goodman is the leader as the kickoff specialist. Jace Crispin, of course, kicked off a little bit last year. Right. He's really more of a directional type guy, but Goodman's a guy that can put it in the end zone. And Joey Jones referenced his confidence. And from our folks down in Brandon, he's not a guy that's been lacking of confidence. And watching him last year in a high school game against Tupelo, he consistently put the ball over the net on extra points, almost like it was just a game to him. And so he's a guy with a big-time leg that can come in. And so while State will have to replace Logan Cook, it sounds like they've got some viable candidates. And
in the return game, of course, the obvious candidates, Dedrick Thomas, Malik Deer, and others have been factoring in. But I've heard a new name start rising to the top now as a possible return man.
Devontae Jason, WAP as people like to call him. He's an electric playmaker, and I don't really know that we've had anybody quite like him in a while. Fred Ross came in with some high accolades, and Devontae Jason's kind of in that same berth. But I don't think he will need a redshirt year to kind of acclimate to the college game. I think he's ready to go. And one of the things that I respect about him and I've really admired him in practice the last week or so is he is a great practice player, that he really attacks practice. A lot of these guys, you can tell their heads are swimming. He's had the benefit of the spring, but he is approaching this fall like a veteran player, like a guy that expects to play, and I think that's important for Bulldogs.
So we've covered a lot of bases here. We haven't talked much about the offensive line and defensive line because we don't need to say much at this point, although I did have interviews with Jeffrey Simmons and Montez Sweat, and I know that, Steve, you talked to several offensive linemen as well, so we'll be getting those features out. Paul Jones covered some interviews as well that we'll be getting out there, but you can check on genespage.com today for some running threads on the press conferences, information that was given out there. I'll be writing about what Coach Moorhead said about how they're scoring practices now with some of their goals for explosive plays and turnovers. A lot of material today to cover to come coming days. But a good day, a good mood. The Bulldogs are scrimmaging tonight, closed. I'm sorry, we won't have any statistics or observations from it, but we'll be talking to the coaches next week on how the scrimmage went. So, for Steve Robertson, for Gene Swindoll, for Paul Jones, Robbie Falk, and Mike Nemeth, and our whole crew at Gene Spade 24/7, this is David Murray.